Hello again, everybody. My name is John D. Healy. I do a podcast. It's called It's Good to Talk, sponsored by Liffey Movers. They've been around almost 50 years, longer than Jeopardy. It's good to talk. I usually have a lot of guests. There's a whole list of them that I could name. So many different backgrounds and all that. No famous sports stars, no famous politicians. Ordinary people talking about their ordinary lives and what they do in their careers. From scientists to massage therapists to Reiki healers, lawyers that do wills, trusts, and estates, and historians. Now, today, I do have a guest later on, but today I want to talk to you about how to write a book, because I produced this book by Stoney McGurn. He was born in 1941, April 2nd, and it's all his life stories from 1941 up to recently. So how did I motivate Stoney to write a book? Because he had all the stories, but he didn't have the motivation or the wherewithal to do it. So he wrote the book like this, all handwritten in pencil, page by page by page by page by page in pencil. So I had to take it from pencil and bring it to print. Now, to motivate him to do that, I used the help of a friend, or the advice of a friend, Maeve Binchy. Maeve Binchy is a famous Irish writer. She was born in 1939, so that makes her 2 years older than Stoney, and she died in 2012. And she wrote a lot of romance, kind of teenage romance, girly books and all that. So I met her on a TV show called The Late Late Show. If you're Irish, it's a well-known, famous show. It was hosted by Gay Byrne. And Maeve was on the panel, and after the show, outside the studio, a bunch of young girls circled around Maeve, and they were all screaming, looking for autographs, of course. And I guess I was the tallest and oldest one there, because poor Maeve suffered from arthritis and she was bent over, despite being over 6 foot one time. That's amazing and interesting in itself. So all the girls were screaming, Maeve, 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 tell us, how do you write a book? And Maeve said, calm down, calm down. I will tell you how to write a book. She said, if you write one page every day, at the end of a year, you will have a book. So I told this to my good friend Stoney, and he started writing more than a page a day. And then he would add stories and add more stories and add more stories. And I had to get it in a format, okay? And another good friend I had at the time was Mitchell Douglas, and he is a literary agent. He passed away too, unfortunately, due to COVID 2 years ago. Sad about that news. And Mitch said to me, a good book has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's as simple as that. A beginning, a middle, and an end. So it has to start somewhere. It has to have real content. It has to have some drama, some ups and some downs, and then the conclusion. So at the time, Mitch advised me to self-publish, and I found a company called Page Publishing. That's their little logo there on the back, Page Publishing. And I met up with Page Publishing, and they said yes. They read the manuscript, which was the type version of the handwritten pencil to print. And they said, yes, we will help you publish the book. And the process started from there. Lots of proofreading to be done, and editing and proofreading and more proofreading. And I got some friends to help me at the time. Vincent McCarthy was one, and another couple on the Upper East Side were very good as well. And then it came back to myself again, correcting spellings. And I know you may say, what about spell check? Well, despite all that, you still have to be thorough, like weeding the garden, actually. So I went through all that and got it into a format. Page Publishing were very patient, because they would send back sometimes and say, any more changes, any more changes. And Stoney had a habit of adding more stories. He would say, oh, I forgot to tell you. Or did I tell you this one? And here's another good story. And again, I had to figure out where to slot them in. He was born 1941, so he had drama from an early age. He was in hospital at the age of 6 or 7. His arm was almost amputated from an accident. People do ask me what happened to his arm, and I usually tell them you have to buy the book. And now it's on audio. So he ended up in hospital for a number of months, and then various romance and frolics as a teenager growing up, various jobs, family life, the history of Ireland at the time, of course, as he was born in County Leitrim, which is close to the border, and the troubles in the north of Ireland and so on and so forth. And neighbours were, well, he was born Catholic, I guess. Now he's an atheist, but he also had neighbours that he was friendly with, and they were Protestant, and he didn't have any animosity towards anybody. And that's how he grew up still to this day, actually. And then his life, leaving Ireland, coming to the United States of America on a ship, leaving Cove, County Cork, big ship, fancy ship, like a cruise ship, I imagine. And even on that, there was a party, and he's a good dancer. He even won an award for dancing on his trip across. No time to be wasted, of course. And then his life as a various jobs and education, not academic education, but technical education, air conditioning and electric and all that stuff, as he explains in the book. And then various jobs in stores and so forth and so forth. And then taxi driving and truck driving, like truck driving, the big tractor trailers that drive down to California and down south. So when he was driving the tractor trailer, this was during the 1960s, Martin Luther King, and lots of issues then that he was not aware of because he wasn't too long in America, and trying to understand protests and discrimination against blacks and so on and so forth. So there's quite a bit of that in the book as well. And it's a good education for anybody that wants to learn a little bit about what went on during the Troubles and the racial discrimination that was down south then and probably still is today, unfortunately. Then he touches on the 60s, 70s in New York City and crime and police corruption and all the frolics that goes on with that as well. He was a bartender in the West Side, and lots of inside stories from there and lots of characters. And of course, crime, drugs, police, corruption, all that's in the book in great detail. One story in the book refers to a priest called Father Cook, who had a lover, which is not unusual, good for him. But the lover had a roommate, and the roommate tried to blackmail Father Cook's boyfriend when he found little notes like, today you have texting on your phone, I love you, you love me, I love you, you love me. But this was simple little notes with similar type of messages, I guess, at a romance stage between a guy and a girl, or two guys or two girls or whatever. But the lovers of Father Cook, his roommate, found them and he tried to blackmail him to get money to buy drugs, I guess, or something like that, of course. And then the police were brought into it, NYPD. And then late one night in the bar, they're all back after doing some investigation, and the police are drinking and they're talking and they were saying, who would ever believe that Father Cook is a homosexual, you know? Because at the time, that type of stuff was kind of kept very much under the carpet. But Father Cook got over that and he went on to be the Cardinal of New York City, Cardinal Cook. Cardinal Terence Cook came out to be a brilliant, respected Cardinal of the New York Diocese. So that's one of the stories in the book. Other stories in the book, as I said, deal with down south, discrimination, all that, the cop corruption, the drugs, him being a bartender and then deciding that he wanted to buy a bar, which he did. And now he bought the bar that's known as Ryan's Daughter on the Upper East Side, which is 350 East 85th Street. And that became a popular place where I was a bartender myself once upon a time. Oh, yes, I am mentioned in the book. Why wouldn't I, after all? And my friend Wendy is mentioned in the book because she worked alongside me. And she is also related to Stoney family-wise because Muriel, Stoney's wife, was her mother. And then, without giving the whole book away, because you have to get it, now you can buy it on audio. You can get it on Amazon too, audio or a hard copy like this one, for less than $20. It's well worth it. And then getting to the end of the book, in between there's lots of romance and girlfriends and so on and so forth. And one girl he had when he was like 21, 22, 23, and he went off truck driving and she went off her way, and that was it. It was like a romance, and then they didn't meet again. And then he met his wife Muriel in Dublin, and there's quite a lot of stories about how he met Muriel in Dublin and so on and so forth, and fell in love, and then she came to New York. Then they got married. I was actually at the wedding, believe it or not. And they get married, and life goes on, and Ryan's Daughter, and so on and so forth. And then later in life, then Muriel became ill with cancer, and she had probably 15 years of dealing with the whole cancer issue, and Stoney was remarkably good to her. And there's stories about Lennox Hill Hospital and stories like that. I won't go into too much detail there about that, but she died at home in her apartment, in his apartment. And he explains dealing with his wife's death and dying and what he had to do and how he had to do it and so forth. And they were very, very, very much in love, excuse me. And the initial manuscript kind of ended there. And I was not too happy about that because I didn't want the book to end on a sad note, because he had such an exciting life and lots of humor and lots of good fun and all of that all along the way. Very exciting. So I thought it was a shame that the book would have an ending like that where his wife died. And then lucky me, again, I'm lucky, the girlfriend he had when he was 22, 23, called on the phone one day and asked for him. And the conversation was somewhat like, you know, how's your wife, Muriel? And he said, no, she died a few years ago. And he said, how's your husband, Tom? And she said, well, he died a few years ago. So life is funny. And it's a funny old world, I say often. And then now they realize that they're both single again in a way, even though they're 80 years old. So they became companions. And that's in the book. And that's a nicer, happier ending than that it ended where his wife died. Now it ends where he's back with a girl he was in love with when he was 21, 22. And they're companions. They go for drives and go to museums and restaurants and all that. And that's also in the book. So now that I have the book on audio, thanks to Audio Networks, you have plug there to Audio Networks. And again, they took it from like soup to nuts, the book, and they have a narrator, Danny Sweetman, to read all the stories. Now, I know you could ask, why don't I read them? But horses for courses. So he reads the stories and he does it justice, gets the highs and the lows, because it is like a roller coaster read. So that's my advice today. And there's a book in everybody, and even a book in you. And if you want to contact me, jhfornews@yahoo.com, and my phone number is 646-468-3463. If you need some help or advice about writing a book, promoting a book, marketing a book, and getting a book on audio. But I will warn you, there are some scams out there, like publishing scams, where they will say, oh, we're going to take your book and you'll make 100,000, 20,000, 50,000, or we'll make it into a movie. So watch those scams. If you are somebody in the middle of doing or thinking of publishing, be very careful. Check the scams. There's a website for that. Publishing scams, they're there. And some of them are very, very blatant and pushy. I had one guy kept calling me, wanting to reproduce the book. And I said, why would you want to reproduce the book? It's already there. Now it's on audio. So when I asked the guy to join me on a meeting like this on Zoom, he ran away, I would say. So that's my advice today is if you think you have a story, write it down. Think of Vinci. 1 page every day. At the end of the year, you'll have a book. So that's my advice for today. I'm waiting for my next guest, Michael Moran. He works for Douglas Elliman. He's a real estate guy, and some more characters coming up. And check out the other list of all of these guys. You see there's over 20. Every single one has an interesting story. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thank you for listening to me, John D. Healy. Remember, it's good to talk.